you could just imagine that I've got this. This is another very niche cartoon reference.
We've moved on from Leeisms, I feel, in this series, and we're just going for niche references that only a small percentage of our listeners are likely to understand.
Welcome to How to Take the Lead, the podcast where we challenge the myths and stereotypes of what it means to be a leader today and help you to succeed in post without compromise. I'm Lee Griffith.
And I'm Carrie-Anne Wade, and together we will be your guides, questioning everything we've ever learnt about leadership, sharing our experiences along the way, and inspiring you to make a real impact in your role.
Visit howtotakethelead.com for show notes, past episodes, and to join our community.
Enjoy this episode. Hello everybody, and welcome to this next episode of How to Take the Lead. I am Carrie-Anne, for those of you who might not be regular listeners, and I'm here with the lovely Lee. I don't know if you want to say hello.
Hello.
Before we get into the
I've been watching loads of University Challenge, and I felt a bit like...
Were you practicing your University Challenge moment with the wave? So if you're watching over on YouTube, you will have got Lee's, how Lee's going to say hi when she appears on University Challenge at some point. Brilliant. I love it. Before we get into the bones of the episode, I'll do a little bit of housekeeping, if that's okay with you, Lee. Just to say that we are on your favourite podcast platform. We drop in every Thursday with a new episode. You can get all of the links for that over at howtotakethelead.com, where you can also find out more about catching up with us on the socials. We are on Instagram, and you can also sign up to our Substack community, where for episodes of the podcast in Series 4, we have also been publishing, I've called them companion articles, but I don't know if that's what they are. That sounds a bit old fashioned, but we've been publishing articles every week alongside the episode with a few more thoughts and some insight following on from our conversations. And if you are a paid subscriber over on Substack, you will also get some added extras, including prompts, helpful tips, additional resources. So if you are into How to Take the Lead, go on over to the website and check all of that out and engage with us. Is there anything else I need to say about how people can generally get in touch with us or follow along with the action? Oh, and we're on YouTube. We're on YouTube. I mentioned it early doors, but yes, we're also on YouTube. If hearing our dulcet tones is not enough for you, you can also watch us as you go over on YouTube. So I think that's everything. That's all the places we're at as How to Take the Lead. So I will, first of all, I should ask you how you are. I normally do, and I haven't, Lee. I'm just literally straight down to business. How are you?
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
I'm all right, actually. I've had a busy day. I just not long got off a meeting, and I ran out to use ablutions and go and get myself a fresh cuppa before I hopped onto this call for you. And I looked in the mirror and thought, oh, it's ghastly to go on television like this. And then I thought, what would Carrie-Anne do? Carrie-Anne would put on a lipstick. So I've put on a lipstick, and it's elevated me.
It's elevated you, and it goes lovely with that top, I have to say.
That wasn't my design. I literally just put my hand in, and it could have been like some vampy purple. I don't know. I've just gone with it.
Whatever came out, it was potluck on the lipstick front. Well, I'm glad you're feeling elevated. I'm glad you've had a busy day. My day's been a bit more chilled, actually. I've been having a sort of catch-up day, which has been nice. And it's very rare, in the day job at least, that I don't have a day full of meetings, but I didn't today. So I've just been catching up on my admin, booking in some of the meetings that I need to have over the next few weeks. I'm feeling quite on top of things, which is very nice.
Don't advertise that you've got a clear diary, though, because people will not allow that to happen again.
Absolutely. And also, it was a good reminder for me to put my time blocking in for the chunks of time where I'm like, right, this is a time I'm doing a project. Yeah. This is my admin time. Just so anybody looking just sees them all greyed out and they can't sneak in a meeting that I don't want to have. So yes, taking some of our own advice about managing my time. So yes, thank you for asking, Lee. So we will now get into the bones of this episode. And we are going to talk about disruptive leadership today, if that's all right with you. It shouldn't be a surprise because obviously some listeners may not think this, but we do prep for these conversations a little bit so that we're all, we're both talking about the same topic. So today's topic is disruptive leadership. And I was just going to set the scene a little bit about what we mean when we're having the conversation about being a disruptive leader, because we do mean it in the main in a more positive sense. So we're not talking about people being disruptive to be difficult and awkward and making trouble. Troublemaker's a good description. We are talking about disruptive leadership in that positive sense. So it might be about, it will be about challenging the status quo, because that's what we're about here at How to Take the Lead. But it's about maybe those leaders who are willing to try new things, put themselves out there, but all in the hope of making progress and improvement to do the right thing. So that's the kind of context in which we're talking about disruptive leadership today. And I thought maybe to start us softly, I would ask you, how might you describe a disruptive leader? So what sort of traits or characteristics do you think disruptive leaders have, just to kind of get us in that headspace?
So I think the first thing is, disruptive doesn't mean troublesome, because I think some people might perceive you as that, and maybe we'll get into that later, because usually it means something to do with change, and people don't like change, so they might label you a troublemaker, but that isn't at the heart of what we are talking about today. For me, I think it boils down to someone who isn't willing to accept the status quo. So you see in organisations that mentality of, we've always done it like this. And I think a disruptor is someone who asks why, and they'll take a risk and want to take a step into the unknown. They'll be seeking to ask and answer a lot of questions that challenge the way things are done. I think they're really comfortable with change. And being apart from the crowd. They don't want to just have this sheep kind of mentality, and really comfortable with sitting with uncertainty, which can often happen in a disruptive space. And I think successful disruptors have a self-awareness, so they know when to push and when to back off. And I think we'll probably get into some of that a bit later in the conversation.
Yeah, I love that. And when you were talking about, you said about being comfortable with change. One of the thoughts I'd had, I hadn't used the word comfortable, but I really like that actually. I'd kind of gone more of quite optimistic that change can happen if they're pushing or pulling at the right levers and, have got the right strategy to make that change. So I think they're not willing to accept that the way things are now, that's the way it has to be forever, if they can see that there's room for improvement. So yeah, absolutely agree with you. And in some of my own experience, I've found some of the disruptive leaders that I've worked with to actually be quite encouraging. And so as well as that challenge, they kind of challenge you in more of an encouraging way to kind of get you onto their same page with the thinking about change and making those improvements. And I've often found that disruptive leaders do have that clarity of vision and purpose into the longer term. And that's what probably drives their level of disruption and desire to want to make that change.
I interviewed a chief exec for my other podcast. And
it's all right. She is allowed to talk about it, everyone. We don't mind. It's, what did you call it? The cousin of? I can't remember what you called it. The cousin of How to Take the Lead.
But he said something and in my mind was describing a disruptor behaviour, and he said he wasn't interested in best practice, he was focused on next practice. And I really loved that framing, because it's helping you to focus on the need to improve and move forwards, and obviously not falling behind or maintaining the status quo.
I love that. And I've listened to that episode, and that was one of my big takeaways actually, Lee, around that next practice rather than best. Because I think there's a connotation with best practice that if you're achieving it, then you can just stop because you're achieving that best practice. But actually it's about that drive, isn't it, to continually improve and push things forward. So it's a good episode, Lee.
Thank you.
Enjoyed that one.
I'm glad you boosted my listener figures.
There'll be a link in the show notes, I'm sure. So I think that's helpful in terms of setting the scene about maybe the type of person and type of leader that we're talking about in this space of disruption. But I wondered if we could explore a bit more now what might be the benefits of disruptive leadership, because we've talked about it not being around troublemaking, not being about just being disruptive for disruption's sake. So what are the benefits of having a disruptive leader or disruptive leadership style in your organisation?
I think for me, it's at the heart of it, it's about bringing innovation and new thinking and new ideas into an organisation. And when you do that, you're bringing an energy and an excitement to both the team and the organisation. So then you start to look at those ripple effects. So you have that, it makes you a place where other people want to work. You become an attractive organisation. You become known reputationally as something that does, somewhere that does things differently, and people want to work with you. And I think it helps breed a general improvement, whether it's performance, whether it's morale, whether it's reputation. And I think if we look at it from an end user perspective, even if we look at ourselves and how we operate as human beings, assuming we all are human beings, or as consumers,
tick the box, I am not a robot.
we want more all the time. We want things to be innovative. We expect more from the organisations that we work with. We want to see improvements in the services that we use. And this is only ever going to come about through leaders who are themselves or are of others encouraging some form of disruption.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that willingness for yourself, but also that ability to encourage and empower others, isn't it? To get into that space where people are thinking and doing in terms of innovation, transformation. And for me, it's about that journey of like progress. So we just talked about it in the last answer to the question, which was around like moving forwards, always pushing rather than accepting things have to be the way they've always been. So yeah, I don't disagree with anything you've said there. And I think the bit for me as a leader is actually thinking about the fact that it does bring results. So actually there are results that come for your organisation, your teams, like you say, it might be your customers, your stakeholders, from having a level of disruption in your organisation. And it's about that openness to that, I think, for me. I think it's hard to achieve some of those benefits if there isn't that open approach and encouragement for that disruption to happen.
Yeah.
And so I guess on the flip side of the benefits, we should talk about it. And you've already mentioned there is a perception sometimes perhaps that being a disruptive leader means that you are a troublemaker or someone who is on purpose trying to poke the bear, maybe, as it were. But are there any disadvantages in your view, Lee, to disruptive leadership? Or are there any disbenefits to disruptive leaders?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the type of disruption that you're causing. We've probably all worked with people who themselves might think they are being disruptors, but actually they're the troublemaker, and what they do is cause chaos and harm. But they do it in their view. They believe their why is to be disruptive and shake things up. But actually, it can have a real negative impact on culture if they're not doing disruption in the right way. I think there's issues of pace. So some people move on really quickly to the next thing, and people can't keep up with. Particularly the innovative people, their mind might be whirring. They might be like, "Oh well, I've said this for implementation or execution. I'm moving on to the next thing." So that can be really hard for people to keep up with. And I think also it's not just the type of disruption, but it's how you disrupt. So the tact and approach that you take, to take people with you on that journey. So you're going to have people who perhaps, as we said right at the start, don't see the need for change. We've always done it like this. And actually you could offend them if you don't make the case for change in the right way. They might think, oh, do you think I'm out of touch or out of date? And they might double down on their own behaviours and thinking. But also, if you're a disruptor, you're from a personality trait point of view, you're likely to be really happy and comfortable with challenging things. You'll probably have a confidence in your decision making and the way that you execute things. You may be happy with confronting issues because that's how you kind of get the grit and get stuff moving on. But the kind of other side of that is that might come across as intimidating. It might come across as adversarial with people. And so, yeah, that way that you approach disruption is really important. I think that what's the guy's name? Facebook guy.
Mark Zuckerberg.
That's it. He said something around move fast and break things, and that was his mantra at Facebook. And yes, that can be a way that disruptors work, but you can imagine in your organisation where you perhaps aren't known for innovation, you might not be cutting edge, to have someone come in acting that way. You could just imagine that I've got this this is another very niche cartoon reference.
We've moved on from Leisms, I feel, in this series, and we're just going for niche references that only a small percentage of our listeners are likely to understand.
I'm not thinking of Wile E. Coyote. I'm thinking of the
the Tasmanian devil. The Tasmanian devil that he like whirls around and causes chaos.
Yeah. I forgot why that came into my head as I was talking, but anyway, that's the image I leave you with.
And I think with that image in mind, I think you're right. Because some of what you've described is about the culture of the organisation, isn't it? And actually, if you're a disruptive leader going into an organisation that maybe hasn't had that kind of leadership before, it is going to take that time to take people on the journey with you, and actually being a lone disruptor and not building into your approach to disruption, that taking people on the journey, that engagement, that really trying to get the buy-in for the future state you're trying to create, will actually be really challenging, and you won't see those results that we've talked about that you can get as a benefit from that disruption. So I think that's really important to think about. And you've mentioned already a couple of things that were really in my head, I guess, around doing disruption the right way, which was that change piece, bringing people on the journey with you, because you have to start from the point that not everyone is going to be on the same page at the same time as you are. So actually, how do you get people to that point where everyone is feeling more comfortable, more able to accept that level of disruption, let alone then potentially empower them to do the disruption for themselves? And I think sometimes, and you mentioned this as well early on in what you were saying, Lee, that disruptive leaders maybe have that where in mind that is moving on to the next idea all the time. What's the next innovation? And sometimes, in my experience, disruptive leaders don't leave things long enough to embed them or to see the results to enable them to assess what the next step should be, because they've already moved like 10 steps ahead onto another idea. And I think sometimes that can feel a little bit dangerous, because you're not doing that assessment and evaluation piece to go, actually, is the innovation or transformation or change I've put in place doing what I intended it to do? Because you've already kind of forgotten about it and moved on. So I think there is something there about that being a potential disadvantage if you don't have the insight as a disruptive leader to maybe do that evaluation and measurement piece, and just take a breath sometimes and pause, because that is okay.
and also it's about knowing what are the wins you want to go for. Like, not every idea has to be executed, not everything needs to be actioned right here and now. you can sometimes create a false sense of urgency. And this frustrates me about organisations when they have to have a burning platform to get everything to change. And that's where we tend to fall down with change. If you actually look at the percentage of successful change programs in organisations, it's really low. It's like less than 30% of change is successful. And that's because, process, consideration, communication, all of that gets pushed by the wayside.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all. So I guess as we're talking, some of what we're describing really does sound like personality type and sort of character traits of people to kind of be working in that way, because that is what comes naturally to them. So I was wondering if, there are people listening to this and they're thinking, oh my God, all of this is so anxiety inducing and it feels really scary to me because it's not the natural state in which I feel comfortable working. Can you develop a disruptive leadership style? And if so, kind of how do you go about doing that?
Personally, I think you can, like with any bit of the leadership toolbox, toolkit, whatever you want to call it, that all of them, they're like muscles and skills that you just have to keep working on. And it might be a really, really tiny muscle. It might be, my glutes are killing me today because I did a massive workout. But like it could be.
I had a lot of leg action yesterday, actually, so it really hurt when I came up the stairs today.
So it's like that, but being conscious about what it is you worked on your legs yesterday, they hurt today, but you're going to carry on going for an exercise. Anyway, I'm taking that analogy a bit too far. But I think that behind it, there is a lot of mindset stuff that's at play. So you might not be comfortable with change or taking risks, for example. Maybe you need to work on trust and trusting your peers for them to be the disruptive ones. They're all types of things you might need to work on as a leader. That doesn't mean that you couldn't get there, but it goes back to that self-awareness piece and understanding of where you need to work. And it might just be you need to dip your toe in the water. When I learned to swim, I didn't go and jump it off the 50-meter diving board and just hoped it happened. So I had lessons. So maybe you don't, if you're not someone who wants to disrupt, don't turn the whole organization upside down. Start small and build on that. You learn. This week my level of disruption was, I've been really thinking about time and how I use my time and the concept of time, and that we feel like we've never got enough time. And you know me, and anyone that listens to this knows me, that I love a Trello board. I love a Notion list. I plan everything.
You are the most organised and planned person I genuinely know in my entire life.
I've ripped up my to-do list this week.
Are you all right? Are you all right?
That's me being disruptive to myself.
You love that. I love that.
Serving me.
It's constraining you potentially from. I feel like this could be a whole spin-off episode, just exploring this with you, Lee. Or like, what's it like, the extra slice on the bake-off or whatever? It's like, I need to get into this at some point with Lee.
Yeah, I can't do another year where I dick about with kind of different variations of tables and charts to try and manage my time, because there will never be enough time.
And because also the time it takes you working out which is the best one of those for you to use is time you could have spent doing one of the things on your list.
Exactly. So, that's majorly disruptive to me.
It is.
My way of working. So you can start small. It doesn't need to be.
I'm sorry, listeners.
Moment.
I'm sorry, listeners. I am still astounded by this, because of all the people I thought was going to say they ripped up their to-do list, it was not going to be you, Lee Griffith. I'm loving it. I can't wait to see how this goes for you.
Yeah. I'm just going to be free and easy and flying by the seat of my pants, but maybe a little stained because I'll be bricking it inside.
I love that. Oh, what an image for you all, listeners.
sorry, that was, I don't know what. See, this is what happens when I take away structure.
This disruption, I fear, may have gone too far too soon. You're like a different person.
I forgot this is going to live on YouTube
forever. I will try to get us back on track at some point, but I'm still in this moment. Sorry. Oh dear.
I was going to say, you can start by starting small. You don't need to like turn the world, although I feel like for you, I've just done that.
You've turned my world upside down. What's happened to Lee? I rely on you to be the organizer with the to-do list. So goodness knows what's going to happen for the future of how to take the lead.
I don't know, I've still got like a semi.
Okay,
we're not going to go
one step at a time, as you said. That's your point. Come on. There's a lot of pant references going on today. I do not know what is happening, but anyhow, moving on from the pants. It's your point, isn't it? One step at a time. So you're not going totally out there with it. You've still got some semi-structure, which is making me feel better about everything.
It could be as simple as I'm going to start questioning every assumption I've made this week or whatever, you know.
Yes.
The basis of stepping into creating a disruptive leadership approach for yourself is, what's the question I'm trying to answer in disrupting this thing? And there is a really good book that I put for our viewers. I don't know if you can see that.
I love it. Disruptive Ideas with the R and the I in quite funky font.
Leandro Herrero. Hopefully I've pronounced that right. But he walks through in that book some pretty like everyday stuff that you could disrupt at work. So it could be looking at your structures and the ways of working. It could be disrupting how you run your meetings. And he gets you in each chapter to imagine what different would look like for each scenario. And then you start to plot out, well, what will that mean in terms of how people would behave? What would that mean in terms of how they'd work? What's the impact of that going to be if they start behaving and working in that way? What steps would I need to take to get us there? And actually, in and of itself, is a really powerful coaching exercise. Like you're imagining your future self, and almost doing that exercise is helping you to test the level of discomfort and disruption that you might be happy with.
I love that. And could I build on what you said
Of
there
course.
about the starting small, and, you know, you don't have to want to change the whole world in one foul swoop, because I think there's something for me about if you don't feel as comfortable in that space, how you can get more comfortable there around creating a better relationship with failure. Because some of what I've noticed when I work with people is that the reason they feel anxious about challenging something or thinking there might be a better or different way to do it is because they fear that the new way might fail. And so therefore they rather stick with where they are, because at least they know that and they can stay in the comfort of that, and they don't have to think about, well, what if the change I try to make doesn't work? So I definitely think there's something for me around that mindset shift, if you want to move into that disruptive space, around giving yourself and the other people that you work with that permission to not only try the new thing, but also to fail at it, because there's always going to be learning from that failure. So I don't want to go down that cliche of a failure is never a failure and all of that kind of stuff. But actually, if you do fail at something, there will be an opportunity to learn from that and see what could change and be different if you try something else the next time. So for me, I think that relationship with failure and that fear and anxiety about failing at something is sometimes the thing that holds people back from wanting to challenge the status quo or do things differently or disrupt. But that starting small and doing something that maybe initially only impacts you is the thing to do to try and get you into that mindset and change some of your behaviours.
Yeah. Failure is almost like one of those, or fear of, or trying to create a scenario where you never fail. It's a falsehood. Like I'm always striving for perfection. Easy for me to say. They're falsehoods that we seem to be kind of nurtured as we develop through our leadership career, but actually the most impactful leaders and the high performing teams embrace failure, embrace good enough in striving for things to be better.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully we've given people a flavour in that part of the discussion about the fact that you can try it out if this isn't the place that you feel most comfortable and confident in terms of being as a leader. So I guess, as we always do when we try to wrap up an episode, we try to give people a tip or something actionable that they can do. So I wondered, Lee, to kind of draw us to a bit of a close in the conversation, what would be your top tip for someone who wants to, I'm going to describe it as step into their disruption? If there's somebody who's like, yeah, this sounds like a bit of me, or I'm nervous about it, but I want to consider how I could be more disruptive as a leader, what tip or tips would you give to them?
I would say just choose one area that you want to zhuzh up a little bit in some way. You want to kind of bring that disruption and ask yourself the question, what's the thing you want to be different, and what you might need to do differently to get there. And then you probably got to do a whole load of mindset work to get you to take the action. But start by asking the question.
I love that. I think that's important, isn't it? Like, what's the purpose of the disruption or the change that you are trying to create? And having that clarity about that is what will help you to then work out what you need to do to get yourself or your team there. But I love that idea of just start small with something so that it doesn't feel too big and scary.
Do you know, it could be as simple as tonight I'm going to brush my teeth with my toothbrush in my other hand, because that's going to really confuse my brain and I'm going to feel really uncomfortable doing that. But once I've done it, I might then want to try something else a bit different to how I've always done it.
I mean, it couldn't get more straightforward than that, could it? So the challenge to the listeners who've listened to this episode, whatever day you listen to it, is next time you brush your teeth, do it with your toothbrush in the opposite hand. And do feedback to us on any of the ways you can get in contact about how that's gone for you. I think for me, it would just be about that giving yourself permission piece, giving yourself permission to do something differently, but giving yourself permission to learn from that. If it doesn't go the way you expect it to, that's okay. It's okay for it not to go right, whatever your perception of right might have been. And I know you've given a book recommendation or reference already, but I would also suggest that people who are really into this and want to kind of really get to grips with it, perhaps read Rebel Ideas by Matthew Syed, because I think that's a really good book to get you into that mindset and think about the sorts of behaviours that you might need to demonstrate to help others to think about disruption and change as well. So that would definitely be my tip.
Good case studies in that book as well of people that have done things in a different way that might even just be food for thought.
Absolutely. Yes, food for thought's right. That's not eliism. That was perfect. Yeah, absolutely. And those case studies will help bring it to life in terms of something tangible that, again, like you say, might give you an idea about what you could do differently to try this style of leadership out. So yeah, that was where I wanted to get to in the conversation. Some top tips for our leaders. So thank you very much for providing some insight and advice for people listening. I would be really keen to hear about listeners' experiences around this in terms of either being the disruptor or potentially being on the other end of being disrupted, and what that's felt like for them. So do leave us comments, catch up with us on the socials, drop us an email, or the links are on howtotakethelead.com. Until next time, where we have another exciting leadership conversation.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to hit follow to make sure you get the next episode. And if today's discussion resonated, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts.
We also have our Substack community where you can get behind the scenes info, ask us anything sessions, and build your network with like-minded leaders.
Visit howtotakethelead.substack.com to find out more.
And if you want to work with us to challenge and change leadership in your organisation, get in touch by dropping us an email, howtotakethelead@gmail.com, or DM us on the socials. Until next week,
Get out there and take the lead.